Say that again, she whispered. The waitress teased the mafia boss and he lost control. The steam rising from the industrial dishwasher in the back of La Sirena smelled of lemon detergent and old grease, a combination that had permanently settled into Emma Cole's pores. She leaned her hip against the stainless steel counter, closing her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. That was all the time she could afford. Her feet throbbed in a way that had gone past pain and settled into a dull, rhythmic numbness. It was the end of a double shift, the second one this week, and the mental calculator in her head was running its relentless tally. $600 for rent due on the 1st, $250 for the electricity, which was already 3 days late. And then there was the big one, the one that made her chest feel like it was being crushed under a heavy stone. Her mother's latest visit to the specialist had cost nearly $1,000 out of pocket, a sum that might as well have been $1 million. Emma opened her eyes and exhaled a long breath, pushing a stray lock of dark hair back into her messy bun. She checked the ticket rail. Table 4 needed tiramisu. Table 7 was still nursing their espressos, preventing her from flipping the table and making the last $20 she needed to break even for the night. "Hey, Cole, you asleep standing up?" The voice belonged to Rico, the line cook, who was currently scrubbing down the grill with a metal brick. He was grinning, his teeth bright against the soot smudged on his cheek. "I am resting my eyes." "Rico," Emma shot back, grabbing the plated tiramisu. "There is a difference. Besides, if I fall asleep, I trust you to catch me before I hit the floor." "I would catch the tiramisu first." Rico laughed, clanging his spatula against the metal rim of the grill. "The cake is worth more than you." "Thanks for the love," Emma said dryly, turning on her heel. She pushed through the swinging double doors, leaving the bright, chaotic noise of the kitchen for the dim, amber-lit elegance of the dining room. La Sirena was an institution in Harborview. It was the kind of place where the tablecloths were heavy white linen. The wine list was bound in leather, and the shadows in the corners were intentional. It was a neutral ground for the city's criminal underworld, though nobody ever said that out loud. The staff knew the rules. You served the food, you poured the wine, and you never, ever saw anything you were not supposed to see. Emma moved through the dining room with practiced grace, dodging a busboy carrying a tray of dirty martini glasses. She dropped off the dessert at table 4, flashing the customers a warm, professional smile that did not quite reach her tired eyes. As she turned back toward the service station, Marco Gianni, the owner, intercepted her. Marco was a short, round man who always looked like he was wearing a suit one size too tight. Tonight, he was sweating more than usual, dabbing his upper lip with a handkerchief. "Emma." "Listen to me," Marco hissed, grabbing her elbow gently but urgently. "I need you on your best behavior tonight. No sarcasm, no attitude." Emma pulled her arm back, frowning. "When do I ever give attitude to the customers?" "Marco?" "I am serious," Marco whispered, his eyes darting toward the front entrance. "Mister? Romano is coming tonight. He called 10 minutes ago. He wants the back corner booth." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The name Romano carried weight in Harborview, the kind of weight that sank bodies in the harbor or made zoning permits disappear. Luca Romano was the head of the family that ran the docks, the unions, and half the real estate in the city. He was not just a customer. He was the reason places like La Sirena existed. "I will be fine," Emma said, by smoothing down her black apron. "I have served the wise guys before. Marco, they tip well and they do not talk much. This is not just a wise guy," Marco said, his voice trembling slightly. "This is Luca. He's different. Just keep your head down, pour the water, and do not look him in the eye too long." Emma nodded, though internally she rolled her eyes. To her, they were all the same. Men in expensive suits playing kings in a castle built on sand. She had bigger problems than a mob boss's ego. She had a brother, Ben, who needed textbooks for his community college courses, and a mother whose heart was failing by the day. The heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was as if someone had turned down the volume on the world. conversations faltered and died. Silverware stopped clinking against plates. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. Luca Romano walked in. He was taller than Emma expected, with broad shoulders that filled out a suit cut from fabric that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. He did not strut like the lower-level enforcers who came in on Tuesdays. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion, fluid and silent. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was strikingly handsome but hard, like a statue carved from granite. Flanking him were two men, thick-necked and watchful, but Emma's eyes were drawn to Luca. He scanned the room once, his gaze cool and detached, missing nothing. For a second, his eyes swept over the service station where Emma stood. She felt a jolt, physical and sharp, as if she had touched a live wire. Then he looked away, moving toward the back corner booth as if he owned the very floorboards beneath his feet. Marco rushed forward, bowing slightly, practically tripping over himself to pull out Luca's chair. Emma watched from the shadows near the kitchen door, clutching her serving tray against her chest. "He looks like he has not smiled since 1995, she muttered to herself. Beside her, Sarah, a new waitress who had only started 3 weeks ago, was trembling. "I have to take that table," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "It is in my section. You will be fine," Emma said, though she doubted it. Sarah was sweet, but she was clumsy when she got nervous. "Just give them the menus and get the water." Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. She grabbed a pitcher of ice water and marched toward the corner booth. Emma watched her go, a bad feeling settling in the pit of her stomach. She saw it happen in slow motion. Sarah approached the table, her hands shaking. As she reached over to pour water into Luca's glass, her elbow bumped against the edge of the high-backed leather booth. The pitcher slipped from her sweat-slicked fingers. Ice water cascaded across the table, splashing onto the expensive tablecloth and dangerously close to Luca's lap. The pitcher hit the floor with a deafening crash that echoed through the silent restaurant. Sarah froze, her hands covering her mouth, eyes wide with sheer terror. One of Luca's bodyguards stood up instantly, his hand moving toward the inside of his jacket. Emma did not think. She just moved. She crossed the dining room in 5 long strides, grabbing a stack of clean linen napkins from a side station as she went. She arrived at the table before the bodyguard could say a word, stepping smoothly between him and Sarah. "Go to the kitchen, Sarah," Emma said, her voice low and steady. "Get the mop. I have this." Sarah fled without a word, practically running. Emma turned to the table. She did not apologize profusely. She did not beg for forgiveness. She simply set the napkins down over the spill, absorbing the water before it could drip onto Luca's suit. "I apologize for the disturbance," she said, her tone professional, calm and utterly void of fear. "It has been a long night. Accidents happen." She looked up then, directly into the face of Luca Romano. Up close. He was even more intimidating. His eyes were the color of dark espresso, unreadable and intense. He was watching her, not with anger, but with a strange, clinical curiosity. He had not moved when the water spilled. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the table, long fingers intertwined. He stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The bodyguard was still standing, glaring at Emma. "Sit down, Matteo," Luca said. His voice was a deep baritone, rough like gravel wrapped in velvet. The bodyguard hesitated, then sat. Luca did not look away from Emma. "What is your name?" "Emma," she answered, lifting the sodden napkins and placing them on her tray. "Well, Emma," Luca said, leaning back slightly. "You have faster reflexes than your friend. She is new," Emma said, keeping her face neutral, "and you are intimidating. It is a bad combination." The corner of Luca's mouth twitched. Almost imperceptibly, he was testing her. She realized he wanted to see if she would crumble like everyone else. "Do you recommend the veal?" he asked suddenly, changing the subject. Emma paused. She could lie and say yes, which was the safe answer. The veal was the most expensive item on the menu, but she looked at this man, who clearly appreciated precision, and decided to tell the truth. "The veal is good," she said, "but the chef is angry tonight because the supplier sent him subpar tomatoes. When he is angry, he oversalts the sauces. I would order the sea bass. He cannot ruin that with salt." Luca stared at her. For a second, she thought she had gone too far. Marco would have a heart attack if he heard her steering the most powerful man in the city away from the veal. Then, Luca nodded. "Sea bass it is, and a bottle of the Barolo, 1998. Emma wrote it down, her hand steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Excellent choice." She walked away, feeling his gaze burning a hole between her shoulder blades. For the next hour, Emma took over the table completely. She moved with efficiency, refilling wine glasses before they were empty, clearing plates the second the last bite was taken. She was professional, invisible, the perfect waitress, but every time she approached the table, she felt the air change. Luca watched her. He did not look at the other customers. He did not look at his phone. He watched her hands as she poured the wine. He watched her face as she explained the specials. It was exhausting. Finally, the meal was over. The bodyguards had retreated to the bar to give their boss some space, leaving Luca alone in the booth with his half-finished glass of wine. The restaurant had emptied out, leaving only a few stragglers. Emma approached the table to clear the dessert plates. Luca had barely touched his panna cotta. "Was everything to your satisfaction?" she asked, stacking the plates on her arm. "It was adequate," Luca said. His voice was quiet, intimate in the empty space of the dining room. "You were right about the chef. I could taste the anger in the appetizer." Emma allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "I told you, never trust a chef who is throwing pans around." Luca looked up at her. His face was still serious, his expression grave. "Do you enjoy it?" "Enjoy what?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely at the restaurant. "Serving people who do not look at you, cleaning up their messes. It is a job," Emma said with a shrug. "It pays the rent, mostly." "Mostly?" Luca asked, raising an eyebrow. Emma realized she had said too much. "I mean, it pays the bills. Everyone has to work. Mr. Romano, not all of us have people to open doors for us." It was a risky comment bordering on rude, but she was tired. Her feet were screaming, and she was thinking about the 3-hour bus ride to the hospital she had to make in the morning to see her mother. Luca did not get angry. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You think I have an easy life, Emma?" "I think you have a different life," she said softly. "People are afraid of you. That must be lonely or exhausting. I cannot decide which." Luca went very still, his eyes locked onto hers, intense and searching. Nobody spoke to him like this, ever. "You are very brave," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "or very foolish." "Maybe I am just tired," Emma replied. She looked at his face, really looked at him, the sharp lines of his jaw, the tension held in his shoulders, the way his brow was permanently furrowed. "You have such a serious face," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Her voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, laced with a teasing lightness she had not intended. "You act like you are carrying the weight of the world, like you are royalty inspecting the troops. It is just dinner, you know?" The silence that followed was absolute. Luca froze. His fingers, which had been tapping a slow rhythm on the tablecloth, stopped mid-air. He looked genuinely stunned, as if she had just spoken in a language he had not heard in decades. Emma's breath hitched. She had gone too far. She had insulted a mafia boss to his face. Panic flared in her chest, hot and sudden. "I am sorry," she started to say. Taking a step back, "I did not mean—" "Wait." The word was a command, low and rough. Luca did not raise his voice, but the authority in it stopped her dead in her tracks. He leaned in closer until she could smell the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, leather, and something sharp like cold rain. His dark eyes were dilated, focused entirely on her mouth. "Say that again," he whispered. Emma blinked, confused. "Say what?" "What you just said," Luca murmured. The words dragged out, heavy with a sudden, confusing tension. "About my face. Say it again." Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. The air between them felt suddenly thick, charged with a static electricity that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. She should leave. She should run to the kitchen, but she didn't. She looked down at him, her fear mingling with a strange, reckless daring. She lowered her voice, matching his volume, her tone breathless and soft. I said, "You have a serious face. You act like royalty, but really, it is just dinner." Something in Luca's face shattered. It was a microscopic shift. His jaw tightened until a muscle feathered in his cheek. His eyes darkened, swirling with a mix of shock and a sudden, raw hunger that he tried to suppress. His hand on the table curled into a fist, his knuckles turning white. He was losing control. She could see it. The icy, perfect facade had cracked, just a hairline fracture, but it was there. He was looking at her not as a waitress, not as a fixture of the restaurant, but as a woman who had just reached through his armor and touched skin. Emma felt a flutter start low in her stomach and rise to her throat. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. Luca stared at her for 1 second, 2, 3. Then he inhaled sharply through his nose, forcibly composing himself. He looked away, staring at the empty wine glass, but she saw his chest rise and fall with a heavy, ragged breath. "Go," he said, his voice strained. "Bring me the check." Emma did not wait to be told twice. She turned and walked quickly toward the kitchen, her legs feeling like jelly. When she burst through the double doors, she leaned against the counter, gasping for air. Her hands were shaking. "What happened?" Rico asked, looking up from the grill. "You look like you saw a ghost." Emma shook her head, pressing her cold palms against her burning cheeks. I do not know. I think I just annoyed him." "Annoyed him?" Rico laughed nervously. "If you annoyed Luca Romano, you would be crying or dead. You are crazy. Cole, playing with fire." "I know," Emma whispered. "I know." She stayed in the kitchen for 10 minutes, letting Marco take the check out to the table. She could not go back out there. She could not look at him again, the way he had looked at her. It felt like he had stripped her bare without even touching her. When she finally emerged to help clean up, the back corner booth was empty. A stack of bills sat under the water glass. It was $500. The tip was more than she made in 2 weeks. Emma stared at the money, feeling a mix of nausea and gratitude. She pocketed it quickly, before anyone else could see, and finished her side work in a daze. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Emma pushed open the back door of La Serena and stepped out into the cool, damp night air. She had changed out of her uniform into worn jeans and a gray hoodie, her hair pulled down to cover her neck. The streets of Harborview were quiet, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of flickering street lamps. The fog was rolling in off the harbor, smelling of salt and decay. Emma hugged her arms around herself and started walking. She lived 20 blocks away, in a neighborhood where the police sirens were background noise and the streetlights were mostly broken. It was a long walk, but she did not have money for a cab. Even with the $500 in her pocket, that money was for her mother. Every penny of it. As she walked, her sneakers slapping against the wet pavement, she replayed the moment in the restaurant. The way Luca had leaned in, the rough grain of his voice. "Say that again." She laughed softly, a bitter, self-deprecating sound that echoed in the empty street. "You are an idiot, Emma," she whispered to herself. "He is a mobster. He probably thought you were mocking him and decided to let you live because he was bored. Do not make it into a romance novel." She turned the corner onto her street, passing the boarded-up windows of an old pawn shop. She was so lost in her thoughts, so focused on the ache in her feet and the memory of those dark eyes, that she did not notice the car. It was a black sedan, sleek and silent, parked half a block down from her apartment building. The engine was idling, a low purr that blended into the city noise. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. Inside the car, the driver, a man named Silvio, watched Emma climb the steps to her crumbling apartment building. "That is the place, boss," Silvio said quietly. "4th floor. It is a rough spot. Not safe for a girl walking alone at this hour. In the back seat." Luca Romano sat in the shadows, He was watching the girl, Emma, fumble with her keys at the front door. He saw the way she looked over her shoulder before slipping inside. He saw the light flicker on in a fourth-floor window a moment later. He had never followed a woman home in his life. It was beneath him. It was reckless. But he could still hear her voice in his head. "You have such a serious face. The audacity of it, the softness of it." He felt the same tightness in his chest that he had felt in the restaurant, a crack in the discipline he had spent 30 years perfecting. She was a waitress. She was nobody. And yet, she had looked at him and seen the man beneath the suit, the exhaustion beneath the power. "Let's go," Luca said, his voice devoid of emotion. Silvio nodded and eased the car away from the curb, the tires rolling silently over the asphalt. But as they drove away, Luca did not look forward. He watched the fourth-floor window in the rearview mirror until it disappeared into the fog, memorizing the route, memorizing the building, memorizing the danger she was in just by existing in his city. He would be back. He knew it with the certainty of a man who rarely denied himself anything. He would be back tomorrow, and the day after that, because he needed to hear her say it again. The rain beat a relentless, rhythmic tattoo against the blackened windows of La Serena, washing away the grime of the city streets, but doing nothing to cleanse the knot of anxiety tightening in Emma Cole's stomach. It was Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the restaurant hummed with a low, steady energy that grated on her nerves. She stood at the server's station, her phone hidden behind a stack of menus, staring at the text message from her brother. "Ben, Prof says I need the new edition of the macroeconomics book. The bookstore wants $240. "Do we have it?" Emma closed her eyes, exhaling a breath that was half sigh, half growl. $240. That was half the rent. That was the grocery budget for 3 weeks. That was impossible. She typed back quickly. "Don't worry about it. I will handle it. Just go to class." She shoved the phone back into her apron pocket, mentally calculating how many extra shifts she would need to pick up to make that promise a reality. Last night felt like a fever dream, a strange aberration in her normally gray life. The way Luca Romano had looked at her, the $500 tip, the terrifying intimacy of his whisper. She had spent the entire day convincing herself it meant nothing. He was a bored rich man, and she was a momentary diversion. Today, things would go back to normal. She would be invisible again. Marco Gianni, the owner, hurried past her, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief that was already damp. "Table 6 needs wine. Emma," he snapped, his voice high and thin, "and straighten your collar. We have standards." Emma straightened her collar without a word, grabbing the bottle of Pinot Grigio. She moved through the dining room, her body on autopilot, her mind still doing math. If she skipped lunch for the next month and walked to work instead of taking the bus, she could save $40. It was a start. The heavy oak front door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cold, wet air and the scent of rain. Marco froze in the middle of the room. The hostess stopped typing on her tablet. A hush rippled through the dining room, starting at the front and rolling toward the kitchen like a wave. Luca Romano stood in the doorway. Tonight. He was alone. There were no broad-shouldered bodyguards flanking him, no entourage to clear his path. He wore a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had been tailored to his frame by someone who understood anatomy better than a surgeon. His coat was damp across the shoulders, dark droplets clinging to the wool. He did not wait to be seated. He walked straight to Marco, who looked as if he might faint. "Mr. Romano," Marco stammered, bowing slightly. We did not expect you tonight. Your usual table is reserved, of course. I can have it cleared in 1 minute. I am not here for a meeting." "Marco," Luca said. His voice was low, carrying effortlessly over the quiet hum of the room. "I want a table for one. In the back." "Of course," Marco said, gesturing frantically to the hostess. "Right this way." "And Marco," Luca added, pausing as he unbuttoned his coat, "is the brunette waitress from last night working?" The question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The bartender stopped shaking a martini. Sarah, the waitress who had dropped the water the night before, widened her eyes at Emma from across the room. "Yes," Marco swallowed hard. Emma. She is here. Good, Luca said, his face impassive. I want her section. Marco turned his head, his eyes finding Emma in the shadows near the kitchen. He gave her a look that was a mixture of pleading and warning. It said, "Do not mess this up." Emma felt a cold shiver race down her spine, followed immediately by a flush of heat. She forced her feet to move, walking to the service station to grab a pitcher of water. Her hands felt steady, but her heart was thumping a chaotic rhythm against her ribs. She waited until he was seated in the back corner, his coat draped over the empty seat across from him, before she approached. "Good evening, Mr. Romano," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, the armor she wore to survive. Luca looked up from the menu he wasn't reading. His gaze hit her with the force of a physical blow. He did not smile, he simply watched her, his dark eyes tracking the movement of her hand as she set the water glass down on the white tablecloth. "Good evening, Emma," he replied. He said her name as if it were a secret he was keeping. Emma poured the water. She concentrated on the stream of liquid, willing her hand not to shake. She noticed, with a sinking feeling, that a loose strand of hair had escaped her bun and fallen across her cheek. As she set the pitcher down, she tucked the hair behind her ear with a quick, nervous gesture. Luca's eyes followed the movement, lingering on the curve of her neck for a fraction of a second, too long. "You are alone tonight," Emma said, aiming for small talk to break the suffocating tension. "I prefer to eat in peace sometimes," Luca said. He closed the menu. "No business, no noise, just the food, and the service," Emma added, trying to keep her tone light. "And the service," Luca agreed. He leaned back in the leather booth, studying her. "You look tired." "Emma." Emma blinked, surprised by the bluntness. "It has been a long week. It is only Tuesday," he pointed out. "In the restaurant business, Tuesday is just second Monday," Emma said, pulling her order pad from her apron. She refused to look directly into his eyes, focusing instead on the knot of his silk tie. "Do you know what you want? Or do you need a moment?" "I know what I want," Luca said softly. The double meaning hung there. Unspoken but loud, Emma tightened her grip on her pen. "I will have the risotto," Luca continued, his tone shifting back to neutral. "And a glass of the Cabernet?" Emma wrote it down, nodding. "Excellent choice. I will put that in for you." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Why do you stay in Harborview?" Emma paused, turning back slowly. "Excuse me?" He was watching her again, with that intense, analytical stare that made her feel like a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You are smart. You are quick-witted. You clearly do not enjoy bowing to men like Marco. So why are you still in this city? Harborview is a sinking ship. Most people with any sense left years ago." Emma let out a short, dry laugh. "You think it is that easy, to just leave? It can be," Luca said. "If you have the will, it is not about will, Mr. Romano," Emma said, her defensive instincts flaring. "It is about rent. It is about medical bills. It is about obligations. Leaving costs money. Staying costs, well, it costs other things, but at least I can pay for those in installments." She realized she was complaining to a mafia boss about the cost of living, but she was too tired to filter herself. Luca did not look bored. If anything, he looked more interested. "Your family?" he asked. "My mother," Emma said briefly. "And my brother. He's in school. I am making sure he finishes." Luca nodded slowly, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the tablecloth. Loyalty. That is a rare currency these days, especially when it requires sacrifice. "It is not a sacrifice," Emma said firmly. "It is just what you do." She walked away before he could ask any more questions, her pulse racing. Why was he talking to her like this? Why did he care about her brother or her rent? It was disarming, and that made it dangerous. 20 minutes passed. Emma busied herself with her other tables, trying to ignore the dark figure in the corner who seemed to track her every move across the floor. At table 4, a group of 4 men in rumpled business suits had been drinking steadily since happy hour. They were loud, their faces flushed with alcohol and entitlement. As Emma walked past them with a tray of empty glasses, one of the men reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Hey, "Sweetheart," the man slurred, his grip uncomfortably tight. "You forgot us. We need another round." Emma stopped, balancing the heavy tray on her other hand. "Sir, please let go of my arm. Don't be like that." The man laughed, looking at his friends for approval. "We are paying customers. You have to be nice to us. That is your job, isn't it? To be nice?" He pulled her slightly closer. Emma felt a flash of cold anger. "I am being nice by not pouring these leftover drinks into your lap. Now let go." The man's smile vanished, replaced by a nasty sneer. "Watch your mouth, girl. You are just a waitress. Do not act like you are better than—" The sentence was never finished. A shadow fell over the table. The air in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. The man holding Emma's wrist looked up, and the color drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. Luca Romano stood there. He was perfectly still. His hands were at his sides. He did not look like he was about to throw a punch, which was infinitely more terrifying than if he had been posturing. He radiated a quiet, absolute menace that sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Let go of her," Luca said. It was not a shout. It was barely above a conversational volume, but the command was absolute. The man dropped Emma's wrist as if it had suddenly turned white hot. He scrambled back in his chair, nearly tipping it over. "Mr.
Romano," the man stammered. We were just joking. We didn't mean anything by it." Luca did not look at the man. He looked at Emma, checking her wrist for marks, his eyes dark and furious. Then he looked back at the table. "You are ruining my dinner," Luca said coldly. His voice was like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "Get up, pay your tab, and leave. If I see any of you in here again, or if I hear you speaking to this woman with anything less than total respect, we will have a very different conversation. Do you understand?" Yes, absolutely. We are going." The men scrambled out of the booth, throwing cash onto the table without counting it. They practically ran for the door, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape the cold judgment of Luca Romano. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Marco was staring from the bar, pale and shaking. Emma stood there, rubbing her wrist where the man had grabbed her. Her heart was pounding, a chaotic mix of adrenaline, gratitude, and a sharp, stinging humiliation. She hated that she had needed saving. She hated that everyone was staring. She looked at Luca. He was watching her, his expression tight. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No," Emma said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling again. She turned and walked swiftly toward the bar, needing to get away from the eyes of the room. She heard Luca's footsteps behind her, heavy and deliberate. She spun around near the espresso machine, cornering him before he could corner her. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with angry tears she refused to shed. "I did not ask you to do that," she hissed, keeping her voice low so the other staff wouldn't hear. Luca stopped, surprised by her anger. He was offending her? "They were hurting you," he said simply. "I stopped it. They were drunk idiots," Emma argued, her voice trembling. "I deal with drunk idiots every night, Luca. I handle it. I do not need you to stand up and play the white knight and terrify half the customers. Now everyone is staring at me. Now Marco is going to be terrified to even put me on the floor because he thinks I am—" "What? Your property." Luca stepped closer, his own temper flaring, his jaw tightened, the muscle jumping in his cheek. "Is that what you think?" Luca asked, his voice dropping to a rough growl. "You think I care about what Marco thinks? You think I care about the customers? Then why did you do it?" Emma challenged, looking up at him, refusing to back down even though he towered over her. "Because I do not like it," Luca said. The words were clipped, sharp. "I do not like watching men put their hands on you. It offends me. It offends you?" Emma let out a breathless, incredulous laugh. "Oh, well, as long as your pride is intact, that is what matters, right? The great Luca Romano cannot suffer the indignity of seeing a waitress harassed." They were standing close now, too close. The air between them was crackling with static. Emma could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight flare of his nostrils as he breathed. "You are stubborn," Luca muttered, shaking his head slightly. Most people would say thank you. I am not most people, Emma shot back, and I can take care of myself. She turned on her heel and marched toward the narrow hallway that led to the staff lockers and the back exit. She needed a minute. She needed to breathe. She heard him following her. Emma stopped in the middle of the dim hallway, spinning around to face him. It was a narrow space, lit by a single flickering bulb. The walls were scuffed beige, the floor linoleum. It was the least romantic place on earth. And yet, as Luca stepped into the corridor, it felt like the entire world had shrunk down to just the two of them. She blocked his path, planting her feet. "Are you following me now?" she asked, chin raised. "I am checking on you," Luca said. He stopped a foot away from her. The hallway was so narrow that his shoulders seemed to fill the space. "I am fine," Emma said. She took a step toward him, a reckless, daring move born of adrenaline and exhaustion. You always have to be the big, scary boss, huh? You cannot just let anything slide. You have to control the room. You have to control the people. Luca stared down at her. The anger in his eyes was fading, replaced by something hotter, darker. He took a slow step forward, closing the distance until they were inches apart. Emma had to crane her neck to look him in the eye. He looked down at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. His gaze was heavy, physical. "You shouldn't talk to me like that, Emma," he whispered. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It sounded like a confession. It sounded like a man who was holding onto a fraying rope with bleeding hands. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. Her breath hitched in her throat. She should be afraid. She knew who he was. She knew what he was capable of. But she didn't step back. "Then don't come back here," she whispered back. It was a challenge. It was a dare. Her fingers tightened around the notepad in her pocket until her knuckles turned white. Luca's hand lifted. He reached toward her face, his fingers curling slightly. For a heartbeat, Emma thought he was going to touch her. She thought he was going to cup her cheek or run his thumb over her lip. She found herself leaning forward, just a millimeter, bracing for the contact. She wanted him to touch her. The realization crashed into her mind with terrifying clarity. Luca's hand hovered in the air between them. His eyes searched hers, raw and vulnerable in the dim light. He looked like he was fighting a war inside his own head. Then, with a visible effort, he redirected his hand. He placed his palm flat against the wall beside her shoulder, leaning his weight onto it. He was looming over her, surrounding her, but he was not touching her. The air hummed with tension. Emma could feel the heat radiating from his body. She could smell the rain and sandalwood and the faint scent of red wine on his breath. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her breathing shallow and fast. Heat climbed up her neck, flushing her skin. She felt dizzy, intoxicated by the proximity, by the sheer force of his presence. Luca closed his eyes for a second, inhaling deeply near her hair. Then he pushed himself off the wall. He stepped back, putting 2 feet of distance between them. The loss of his warmth was immediate and jarring. He looked at her one last time, his expression unreadable, masked again. Then he turned and walked back toward the dining room without a word. Emma stood alone in the hallway for a long time, pressing her hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. When she finally returned to the floor, Luca was back at his table. He had ordered dessert, a slice of ricotta cheesecake. It sat on the table, untouched. He stayed for another hour. He drank an espresso. He watched the room. But mostly, he watched her. He watched her pour water. He watched her carry trays. He watched her laugh at a joke from the busboy. His eyes were narrowed, calculating, possessive. Finally, he signaled for the check. He paid in cash, leaving another stack of bills that made Emma's stomach twist with guilt and relief. As he stood to leave, he did not come over to say goodbye. He simply buttoned his coat, gave her one last lingering look that felt like a physical touch, and walked out into the rainy night. Emma began to clear the table, her hands moving mechanically. Marco appeared at her elbow, and he was not sweating anymore. He looked pale and serious. "Emma," he said quietly. She looked up. "Yes."
Marco? Marco looked at the empty table, then back at her. His voice was hushed, fearful. Luca Romano is a dangerous man. Emma? He is not a customer. He's not a boyfriend. He's a shark. I know what he is, Emma said defensively. Do you? Marco asked. Because the way he looks at you, it is not safe. For you, for this place. He leaned in closer. Do not provoke him, Emma. And for the love of God, do not attract him, a man like that. He does not know how to hold something without crushing it. Emma looked at the door where Luca had exited. She thought about the way his hand had hovered near her face. She thought about the raw hunger in his eyes. She thought about the $240 for Ben's textbook that she could now afford. I am just doing my job, Marco, she said quietly. Marco shook his head and walked away. Emma picked up the untouched cheesecake, her fingers brushing the spot on the tablecloth where Luca's hand had rested. The fabric was still warm. Over the next 10 days, the atmosphere inside La Sirena shifted. It was a subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a summer storm, but everyone felt it. The source of the change sat in the back corner booth, night after night, as reliable as the tide and twice as dangerous. Luca Romano had become a fixture. He did not bring his entourage anymore. He did not hold meetings. He simply came in at 8 o'clock, ordered a glass of red wine and a light dinner, and waited. He waited for Emma. The kitchen staff had started to whisper. At first, it was lighthearted. Rico, the line cook, would nudge Emma with his elbow when she came back to pick up an order. Your boyfriend is looking at his watch. Cole, Rico would tease, flipping a steak on the grill. You better hurry up with that breadbasket or he might declare war on the bakery. Emma would roll her eyes and shoot back a sarcastic retort, but the laughter in the kitchen had a brittle, hollow edge to it. They joked that she was his favorite waitress, that she had the magic touch, but Emma noticed how they all stopped talking whenever she walked toward the dining room. She noticed how Marco, the owner, sweated through his shirts every time Luca glanced toward the bar. They were afraid. And beneath her own bravado, beneath the strange, electric pull she felt whenever she approached table 42, Emma was afraid too. She was afraid because she knew that men like Luca Romano did not do things by halves. He was not just a customer. He was a force of nature, and he had decided, for reasons she could not fathom, to focus all his attention on her. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon that smelled of impending rain, Emma's fragile balancing act collapsed. She was in the middle of the lunch rush when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a distinctive vibration, a pattern she had set specifically for the rehabilitation center where her mother stayed. Emma dropped a basket of garlic knots on the service counter and ran to the alleyway out back, her hands trembling as she answered. Miss Cole? The voice on the other end was Dr. Evans, and the tone was grave. We need you to come in. Your mother had an episode this morning. Her breathing became very shallow and her heart rate spiked. We've stabilized her, but we need to discuss the next steps. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. I am on my way, she whispered. She left work in the middle of a shift, ignoring Marco's panicked protests. The bus ride to the hospital took 40 minutes, but it felt like 40 years. Emma sat by the window, watching the gray city blur past, her fingernails digging into her palms until they left crescent-shaped marks. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Emma found her mother in a narrow room on the 3rd floor, looking small and frail against the stark white sheets. She was sleeping, her chest rising and falling with a terrifyingly delicate rhythm. Doctor. Evans met Emma in the hallway. He was a kind man with tired eyes, holding a clipboard that contained Emma's worst nightmare. She is stable for now. Emma. Doctor, Evans said gently, but the current medication is losing its effectiveness. There is a new treatment protocol, an immunotherapy drip that has shown incredible results for her specific condition. It could give her years. Emma. Good years. Emma felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. That is amazing. When can we start? Doctor. Evans hesitated. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at her. That is the problem. The insurance company has already denied the request.
They classify it as experimental. Emma's stomach dropped. Denied it? But if it works... It does work, doctor, Evans said, but without insurance. The out-of-pocket cost is significant. How significant? Emma asked, her voice steady only through sheer force of will. The initial round is $12,000, the doctor said quietly, and she would need 3 rounds over the next 6 months. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. $12,000. It might as well have been $12 million. Emma had $300 in her checking account. She was still paying off the funeral costs for her father from 5 years ago. I see, Emma said. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I need to make some calls. I need to think. She sat in the hallway for an hour after the doctor left, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. She cried quietly, without making a sound, the tears hot and fast on her cheeks. She felt a crushing weight settling on her shoulders, the absolute suffocating realization that love was not enough. You could love someone with every fiber of your being, and they could still die because you did not have $12,000. She washed her face in the hospital bathroom, scrubbing her skin until it was pink, trying to erase the evidence of her despair. Then, because she had no other choice, she went back to work. Emma arrived at La Serena at 6 o'clock for the dinner shift. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was pale, her eyes were rimmed with red despite her best efforts, and her movements were stiff and mechanical. She moved through the motions of the evening. Water, wine, bread, specials, check, reset. At 8 o'clock, Luca Romano walked in. He took his seat in the corner. He did not look at the menu. He watched Emma. He watched her cross the room with a tray of heavy pasta dishes. He watched her force a smile for a rude couple at table 7. He watched the way her shoulders slumped for a fraction of a second when she thought no one was looking. When Emma finally approached his table, she did not have the energy to banter. She did not have the energy to be the witty, challenging woman he seemed to find so amusing. "Good evening, Mr. Romano," she said, her voice flat. "The usual?" Luca looked at her. His gaze was intense, dissecting her face with a precision that made her want to hide. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you," Emma replied, staring at the center of the table. "That is exactly what a girl wants to hear." "I mean it," Luca said, his voice dropping. "You look like you have not slept in a week. Your hands are shaking." "I am fine." Emma lied. "Just a long day." "Do you want the sea bass?" "Bring me the sea bass," Luca said, but he did not stop looking at her. "And bring yourself a glass of water. You look like you are going to faint." "I'm not going to faint," Emma snapped, a flash of her old fire sparking briefly before dying out. "I am working." She turned and walked away before he could say anything else. The service continued. Emma avoided his table as much as possible, sending the busboy to refill his water. She could feel Luca's eyes on her back. Burning, persistent, it made her skin prickle. She just wanted the night to end. She wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and try to figure out how to sell a kidney on the black market. When Luca finally finished his meal, the restaurant was beginning to empty out. Emma walked over to clear his plate. "Thank you, Mr. Romano," she said, placing the check on the table. Luca placed his hand over the leather folder of the check. He did not open it. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. He slid it across the tablecloth toward her. "For your trouble," he said quietly. Emma stared at the envelope. It was not a standard tip. It was too thick. The paper was heavy, expensive. "Thank you," she said automatically. She picked it up, expecting it to be a generous cash tip, maybe a few $100s like before. She took the envelope into the kitchen to put it in her apron, but curiosity and a strange, sinking feeling made her pause near the dishwashing station. The kitchen was empty for the moment, the staff out on a smoke break. Emma slid her finger under the flap of the envelope and opened it. She stopped breathing. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. It was an inch thick. She did not have to count it to know it was thousands of dollars. 5,000, 10,000. It was an obscene amount of money. Emma stared at the cash, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird.
For a second, she felt a wave of relief, so potent it almost knocked her over. This was the money for the treatment. This was her mother's life. But then, the relief curdled into something else, something hot and acidic, humiliation. He had seen her struggling, he had seen her pain, and he had decided to fix it the way men like him fixed everything, by throwing money at it. He was buying her. He was paying for her attention, for her time, for her silence. It felt like a transaction. It felt dirty. The shame burned through her veins, hotter than the anger. She was not a charity case. She was not someone he could just pay off because he felt pity. Emma shoved the bills back into the envelope. She marched out of the kitchen, the double doors swinging violently behind her. The dining room was nearly silent. Luca was still sitting at his table, sipping the last of his wine. He looked up as she approached. Emma did not slow down. She walked right up to his table and slammed the envelope down on the white linen. It landed with a heavy, dull thud. "Take it back," she said. Her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with fury. Luca looked at the envelope, then up at her face. His expression was calm, maddeningly unruffled. "Is it not enough?" he asked. Emma gasped, her face flushing a deep, angry crimson. "Do not insult me." "I am not insulting you." "Emma," Luca said, his voice remaining level, "I am paying you. You provide a service. I appreciate it." "This is not a tip," Emma hissed, leaning over the table, her hands gripping the edge until her knuckles turned white. "There is thousands of dollars in there. That is not a gratuity. That is a payment, and I am not for sale." The few remaining customers turned to look, but Emma did not care. She was running on adrenaline and grief. Luca's jaw tightened. He sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. "You are being dramatic." "I am being dramatic?" Emma laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "You walk in here like you own the place, like you own the whole city, and you think you can just fix people with your wallet. You think because I am a waitress, because I look tired, that I am looking for a handout. I do not want your money. Luca, I do not want your world anywhere near me or my family." Luca stood up. The movement was sudden and fluid. He towered over her, his presence instantly dominating the space, the air between them charged with electricity. "It is just help." "Emma," he said, his voice low and hard. "Why are you fighting me?" "Because I do not know what you want in return," Emma shouted, her voice cracking. "Men like you never give anything for free. What is the price? Luca? My dignity? My silence? What?" Luca stared at her. The anger in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by something that looked strangely like hurt. He looked at her flushed face, her bright, tear-filled eyes, and he realized he had made a mistake. He had treated her like a problem to be solved, not a person. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "There is no price," he said. His voice was no longer commanding. It was quiet, sincere. "I saw that you were hurting. I wanted to make it stop. That is all." Emma stared at him, her chest heaving. The fight drained out of her as quickly as it had come, leaving her hollow and exhausted. She covered her face with her hands, a sob escaping her throat before she could stifle it. "Tell me," Luca said. He stepped around the table, moving closer to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Tell me what happened." Emma shook her head, keeping her hands over her face. "I can't." "Tell me," he repeated. "It was not an order. It was a plea. My mother," Emma whispered through her fingers. She needs a treatment. The insurance won't pay. It costs $12,000. I don't have it, and she's going to get worse, and I can't do anything." She dropped her hands, looking up at him with wet, defeated eyes. "So when I saw that money, I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it so bad, and that made me hate myself." Luca looked at her. He looked at the tears tracking through the light makeup on her cheeks. He looked at the exhaustion etched into the lines of her face. His expression shifted. The irritation vanished. The confusion vanished. In their place settled a look of absolute, terrifying determination. It was the look of a man who moved mountains because they were in his way. He reached out and picked up the envelope. He held it for a moment,
then placed it gently back on the table, but he did not push it toward her. "Keep the money," he said. "Or don't. Burn it if you want. It does not matter." He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space, forcing her to look up at him. "Your mother will get the treatment," he said. Emma blinked, wiping a tear from her chin. "What? I will make a call tonight," Luca said. His voice was matter of fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "The hospital administrator owes me a favor, a significant one. Your mother will be approved for the treatment by tomorrow morning. There will be no bill." "Luca," Emma started, shaking her head. "I can't let you. You are not letting me do anything," Luca interrupted. "I am doing it." He looked her dead in the eye, his gaze intense and unwavering. "Listen to me, Emma. As long as you work in this restaurant, as long as you are standing in front of me, no one in your family will go without what they need. I will handle it." "But why?" Emma whispered. "Why would you do that?" Luca looked at her for a long moment. He seemed to be searching for the answer himself. He looked at her mouth, then her eyes. "Because I can," he said simply, "and because I hate seeing you cry." He turned and walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the middle of the dining room, the envelope still sitting on the table, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 2 hours later, Emma locked the front door of La Serena. The restaurant was dark, the chairs upturned on the tables. The rain had cleared, leaving the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. She turned the key in the lock and pulled it out, turning to head toward the bus stop. Luca was waiting for her. He was leaning against the brick wall of the building, his hands in the pockets of his long wool coat. The smoke from his breath curled up into the cool night air. His car was idling at the curb a few yards away, but he was standing there, in the shadows, waiting. Emma stopped. She should have been surprised, but she wasn't. "You did not have to wait," she said, clutching her purse strap. "I know," Luca said. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her. They stood together on the sidewalk, bathed in the soft amber glow of the street lamp above them. The city was quiet, a distant hum of traffic, the only sound. "Did you make the call?" Emma asked quietly. Luca nodded. "It is done. She starts on Thursday." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at his shoes, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Luca said. He took a step closer. He was so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, a shield against the damp chill of the night. "You scare me," Emma admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "You do things, big things, like they are nothing." "Maybe I just want you to see me," Luca murmured. "Not the boss, not the monster everyone talks about, just me." Emma looked up. His face was softened by the shadows. The hard lines of his jaw relaxed. He looked younger. He looked human. He reached out. His movement was slow, telegraphing his intent. He extended his hand and gently touched her forearm. His fingers were warm through the thin fabric of her coat. He held her carefully, with a lightness that belied the strength she knew he possessed. It was as if he were touching something made of glass, afraid that if he applied even an ounce of pressure, she would shatter. Emma did not pull back. She stood frozen, her breath hitching in her chest. The point of contact burned, sending a jolt of awareness through her entire body. Luca watched her face, searching for any sign of fear or rejection. When he saw none, he stepped closer. His other hand lifted. He reached up, his fingers hovering near her jawline for a heartbeat, trembling slightly. Then, he cupped her cheek. His palm was rough, warm and dry. His thumb brushed lightly along her cheekbone, wiping away a phantom tear that wasn't there. It was an intimate, possessing gesture. Emma's breath came out in a shaky sigh. She looked into his dark eyes and saw a depth of emotion that terrified and thrilled her. "Say that again," she whispered. Her voice was half teasing, half shaky, a desperate attempt to find her footing on shifting ground. Luca's thumb stroked her skin, a slow, hypnotic rhythm. "Say what?" "About taking care of us," Emma breathed. Luca lowered his head. His face was inches from hers. She could smell the scent of him, soap, tobacco, and cold night air. "I will make sure you are safe. Emma," he said. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating in the small space between them. "I will make sure nothing ever touches you." Emma swallowed hard. The urge to lean into his hand, to close her eyes and let him take the weight of the world off her shoulders, was overwhelming. She tilted her head slightly, her lips parting. Crack, crack, crack. The sound ripped through the night air like a whip. Gunshots. They were close. Down the block. 3 sharp reports that echoed off the brick buildings. The moment shattered instantly. Luca moved before Emma could even register the sound. The tenderness vanished, replaced by a terrifying, lethal efficiency. He grabbed Emma by the shoulders and spun her around, shoving her against the brick wall of the restaurant. He placed his body between her and the street, covering her completely. He was a solid, tense shield of muscle and wool. "Silvio," Luca barked, his voice a command that brooked no hesitation. The back door of the idling sedan flew open. His driver, Silvio, was already out, a handgun drawn, scanning the rooftops and the street corners. "Stay down," Luca ordered Emma, his mouth pressed close to her ear. He was pressing her into the brick, his hand on the back of her head, forcing her down. Emma clung to the back of his coat, her fingers twisting into the fabric. Her heart was racing so fast she thought she might pass out. She could feel the tension in Luca's body, the coiled violence ready to spring. The gunshots had been a warning. There was no screaming, no shattering glass, just the echo fading into the silence of the harbor. But the message was clear. Luca pulled back slightly, scanning the street over her shoulder. His face was transformed. The softness was gone. The man who had touched her cheek with such gentleness was gone. In his place was the dawn. Cold, calculated, dangerous. "Get in the car," Luca said, grabbing her arm. "Now." Emma looked at him, her eyes wide with shock. The reality of his world had just crashed into hers. Loud and violent, she realized then, with a sickening clarity, that the safety he promised came with a price she had not understood until this very second. She let him pull her toward the car, her legs shaking, the sound of the gunshot still ringing in her ears. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers painted the wet pavement of the street in a chaotic, strobing rhythm. The air smelled of ozone, burnt rubber, and the metallic tang of fear that seemed to cling to the brick walls of the alleyway. Emma Cole sat on the edge of an ambulance bumper, a thermal blanket draped over her shoulders. Though she was not cold, she was numb. A young police officer with a notepad stood in front of her, asking questions that sounded like they were coming from a great distance. "Did you see the shooter, Miss Cole?" the officer asked, his pen hovering over the paper. Emma shook her head. Her gaze drifted past him to where Luca Romano stood near the entrance of La Serena. He was speaking to a sergeant, a man with gray hair and a tired face. Luca looked impeccable, untouched by the violence that had just erupted feet from where they had been standing. His coat was smoothed, his hands were clasped calmly behind his back, and his expression was one of polite, civic concern. "No," Emma said, her voice hollow. "It was dark. It happened so fast. Behind Luca, near the shadows of the alley. Silvio and 2 other men in dark suits were huddled together. They were not speaking to the police. They were whispering to each other, their faces hard and grim, phones pressed to their ears." Emma knew, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, that they were not planning a legal defense. They were planning a response. The officer sighed and closed his notebook. "All right. If you remember anything, give us a call, Mr. Romano has already offered to provide security footage, though he says the cameras might have malfunctioned due to the rain." Of course they did, Emma thought. She watched Luca shake the sergeant's hand. It was a firm, practiced handshake. The police began to disperse, rolling up the yellow tape, treating the attempted murder of a major crime figure as if it were a routine traffic accident. It was terrifyingly efficient. Luca turned and looked at her. Across the 20 feet of wet asphalt, his eyes found hers. They were dark, unreadable, and heavy with a message she could not decipher. He started to walk toward her, but Marco Gianni, the restaurant owner, scurried out of the front door and intercepted Emma first. "Emma, come inside," Marco hissed, grabbing her arm with a clammy hand. "The police are leaving. We need to close up properly." Emma let Marco pull her into the restaurant, breaking eye contact with Luca. The dining room was empty, the lights turned up to a harsh, cleaning brightness that made everything look stark and ugly. Marco pulled her into the small, dry storage pantry and closed the door, cutting off the noise of the kitchen staff cleaning up. "You have to listen to me, Emma," Marco said. His voice was trembling, his face pale and slick with sweat. "What is it?" "Marco," Emma asked, leaning against a shelf of canned tomatoes. She felt exhausted, her bones aching. "That was not a random robbery," Marco whispered, his eyes wide. "That was the Valenti family. They are rivals. They have been at peace with the Romanos for 5 years. But tonight that peace ended." "So?" Emma asked, hugging the blanket tighter around herself. "What does that have to do with me?" Marco stared at her as if she were a child who had wandered into a minefield. "Emma, wake up," he snapped, fear making his voice sharp. "The Valentis do not miss. They sent a message. And the message is that anyone standing next to Luca Romano is a target. You are standing next to him. You are the waitress he asks for. You are the one he waits for outside." The words sank into Emma's chest like shards of ice. She remembered the way Luca had shoved her against the wall, his body covering hers. She remembered the heat of his hand on her cheek just seconds before the shots rang out. "They know who you are," Marco continued, his voice dropping to a terrified murmur. "In their eyes, you are part of his world now. You are leverage. You are a weakness. I am just a waitress," Emma whispered, denial rising in her throat. "To them, you are a way to hurt him," Marco said. "Stay away from him. Emma, for your own sake. If he comes in, you are busy. If he asks for you, you are sick. Do not let him drag you down with him." He opened the door and hurried away, leaving Emma alone in the pantry, the smell of oregano and dust filling her lungs. She stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, realizing that the safety Luca had promised her was the very thing that was putting her in danger. For the next 3 days, Emma became a ghost in her own workplace. When Luca arrived at 8 o'clock, sharp as a razor, Emma was already in the kitchen, scrubbing counters that were already clean. She asked Sarah to take his table. She asked Rico to run his food. She hid in the walk-in refrigerator, organizing lemons, just to avoid walking through the dining room. She could feel his presence in the building. It was a physical weight, a magnetic pull that tugged at her senses. She knew exactly where he was sitting. She knew when he ordered wine. She knew when he sent a plate back because it was cold, something he never did, a clear sign of his growing irritation. On the 3rd night, Emma risked a glance through the small circular window in the kitchen door. Luca was sitting in the corner booth. He was alone. He was not looking at his phone. He was not looking at the food in front of him. He was looking directly at the kitchen door, as if he knew she was standing there. His expression was hard. The softness she had seen under the street lamp, the vulnerability he had shown when he offered to pay for her mother's treatment, was gone. His jaw was set in a line of granite. His eyes were cold, calculating, and angry. He knew what she was doing. He knew she was pulling away, and the realization seemed to harden him, turning him back into the statue everyone feared. Emma let the door swing shut, her heart pounding. She told herself this was for the best. Marco was right. She had a sick mother and a brother in college. She could not afford to be collateral damage in a mob war. But late at night, when she lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, all she could feel was the phantom warmth of his hand on her forearm and the ghost of his voice promising to keep her safe. On Friday, a storm rolled in off the Atlantic. It was a violent, thrashing tempest that rattled the window panes of La Serena and turned the streets of Harborview into rivers of black water. The wind howled like a wounded animal, stripping leaves from the trees and sending trash cans skittering down the pavement. The restaurant was dead. Most reservations had canceled by 5 o'clock. Marco sent the busboys and 2 of the waitresses home early, leaving a skeleton crew to manage the empty floor. Emma stayed. She needed the hours, storm or no storm. At 8 o'clock, The heavy front door opened against the wind. Luca walked in. He was wet, his coat darkened by the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He shook the water from his umbrella and handed it to the terrified hostess. He looked around the nearly empty dining room, his eyes scanning the floor until they landed on Emma, who was folding napkins at the bar. He walked straight to his table in the back corner. He did not sit down immediately. He stood there, waiting. Marco approached him, looking like he might have a stroke. "Mr. Romano, the kitchen is closing soon, but we can—" "Send Emma," Luca said. Marco hesitated. "Mr. Romano, Sarah is on the floor tonight. She can—" "I said send Emma," Luca repeated. He did not raise his voice, but the tone cut through the air like a knife. Marco swallowed hard and turned to Emma. He gave a small, defeated nod. Emma took a deep breath. She grabbed her notepad and walked across the dining room. Her legs felt heavy. The sound of the rain battering the roof was deafening, filling the silence between them. She stopped at his table. She did not smile. She did not offer a menu. "Good evening. Mr. Romano," she said stiffly. Luca sat down slowly. He looked up at her, water dripping from the end of his hair onto his collar. "You have been avoiding me," he stated. "I have been working," Emma said, looking at the salt shaker. "You have been hiding," Luca corrected. "You sent the new girl to my table 3 nights in a row. You've been in the kitchen when I arrive, and in the kitchen when I leave. I am busy," Emma said. "Sit down," Luca said. "I cannot sit down. I am on the clock. There are no customers. Emma, sit down. It was not a request." Emma looked at Marco, who was studiously polishing glasses at the far end of the bar, refusing to look in their direction. She sighed and slid into the booth opposite him. The leather was cool against her legs. "What do you want, Luca?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to know why you are running," Luca said. He placed his hands on the table, palms flat. "Is it the shooting?" Emma let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Is it the shooting? You say that like it was a minor inconvenience, like it was bad weather, yes. Luca, it is the shooting, it is the guns, it is the police, it is the fact that people are trying to kill you." "They were not trying to kill you," Luca said quietly. "They were shooting at us," Emma cried, her voice rising. "At us! Luca, Marco told me who they were, the Valenti family. He told me that anyone standing near you is a target. He told me I am a target." Luca's eyes darkened. A flash of genuine anger crossed his face, but it was not directed at her. "Marco talks too much. Is he lying?" Emma demanded. "Tell me he is lying. Tell me I am safe." Luca looked at her. He opened his mouth to speak, to give her the reassuring lie, but he stopped. He looked at the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion, the way her hands were clenched into fists on the table. He respected her too much to lie. "He is not lying," Luca said softly. The truth hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She looked away, staring out the window at the rain lashing against the glass. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Really?" Luca leaned back, running a hand over his face. He looked tired. Not physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying a weight that never got lighter. "I am a businessman. Emma, don't—" Emma snapped, turning back to him. "Don't give me the line. I want to know. Why do you do this? Why do you live like this? You have money. You could leave. You could go anywhere. Why stay here and fight wars over what? Concrete? It is not about concrete," Luca said, his voice hardening. "It is about order." "Order," Emma scoffed. "My father built this," Luca said. He gestured vaguely at the city outside the window. Not the buildings, the structure. Before him, this city was chaos. The docks were controlled by gangs who killed for sport. The unions were broken. Small businesses like this one were paying protection money to 5 different crews and getting burned down anyway. "And now they pay you," Emma said bitterly. "Yes," Luca said, unflinching. "They pay me, and in exchange, nobody burns them down. In exchange, the drugs stay out of the school zones. In exchange, the violence is contained. It is a dam. Emma, I am the dam. If I leave, if I let the Valentis take over, the flood comes,
and the flood drowns everyone. He leaned forward, his eyes intense and pleading. I did not choose this life because I enjoy violence. I chose it because the alternative is worse. I made deals. I made brutal choices. I have done things that would make you sick to your stomach. But I did them to keep the monsters at the gate. Emma looked at him, torn between revulsion and a reluctant, painful empathy. She saw the burden he carried. She saw the logic in his madness. But she also saw the blood. You are justifying it, she said, her voice shaking. You are telling yourself you are the hero so you can sleep at night, but you are just another monster. Luca. You are just the monster currently in charge. Luca flinched, as if she had slapped him. Maybe, he admitted, his voice rough. But I am the monster who paid for your mother's treatment, Emma recoiled. That is low. It is the truth, Luca snapped. The world does not care about people like you. Emma, it does not care about your mother or your brother or your rent. It chews you up and spits you out. The only reason I can help you is because I stepped outside the rules. Because I became something the world fears. So I should be grateful, Emma asked, her voice rising to a shout. I should be grateful that you dragged me into a war zone. I did not ask for your help. I did not ask to be a target. I did not mean for you to be a target, Luca shouted back, his composure finally cracking. The sound of their voices echoed in the empty restaurant. Marco dropped a glass behind the bar. It shattered with a sharp crash. But neither of them looked. They were locked in a staring contest, chests heaving, adrenaline flooding their veins. Suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the room in a stark, blue-white flash. The thunder followed instantly, a boom so loud it shook the floorboards. The lights in the restaurant flickered once, twice, and then died. La Serena plunged into darkness. A moment later, the emergency lights kicked on. They were dim. Amber-colored bulbs mounted near the exits, casting long, strange shadows across the room. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The music stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Save for the relentless drumming of the rain, the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, seated in the cocoon of shadows on the back table. The anger that had been screaming between them suddenly shifted, curdling into something else, something thick and heavy. Emma stood up. Her legs were shaking. I can't do this, she whispered. I have to work. I have to go check the breaker. She turned to walk away. Luca's hand shot out. He caught her wrist. His grip was firm but not painful, a tether anchoring her to the spot. Emma froze. She did not pull away. She stood with her back to him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a fist. Luca, let go, she said, her voice weak. He did not let go. Instead, he used his grip to gently turn her around. Emma turned. She was standing between his knees now, the edge of the table pressing into her hip. Luca was still seated, looking up at her, in the dim amber light. His eyes were black pools, reflecting the shadows. He was still holding her wrist. His thumb began to move, drawing small, unconscious circles against the delicate skin of her inner wrist, right over her pulse point. I never meant to drag you into danger. Emma, he whispered. His voice was raw, stripped of all its usual polish. That is the last thing I ever wanted. Emma looked down at him. She saw the conflict in his face. She saw the fear he held for her, a fear that matched her own. And beneath the fear, she saw the hunger. It was naked and terrifying. She stepped closer, driven by an instinct she couldn't name. She was now standing inside the V of his legs, her body inches from his. You are losing your grip. Luca, she said softly. Her voice found a trace of that old, teasing spark, though it was laced with tremors. You are shouting in a restaurant. You are following waitresses. You are losing control. Luca stared at her mouth. His hand on her wrist tightened slightly. I lost control the minute I saw you, he murmured. Emma's breath hitched. She tilted her chin up, looking down at him with a challenge that was also an invitation. You lose control every time I talk back, she whispered. Maybe you are not as scary as they say. Luca's jaw tightened. The muscle in his cheek jumped. His eyes darkened.
the pupils dilating until the iris was almost gone. "Say that again," he growled. Emma's heart raced. She lowered her voice until it was just a breath. Brushing against the silence, I said, "Maybe you are not as scary as they say." Luca broke. He rose from the chair in one fluid, powerful motion. He did not step back. He stepped into her, crowding her space, his body pressing her gently backward until her lower back hit the edge of the table. He did not pin her down aggressively. He caged her. He released her wrist and slid his hand around the small of her back, his palm burning through the thin fabric of her uniform shirt. He pulled her flush against him, hip to hip, chest to chest. His other hand came up, his fingers sliding into the hair behind her ear, cupping the back of her neck. Emma gasped, her hands flying up to grip the lapels of his suit jacket. Luca bent his head. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his breath hot against her lips, giving her one last chance to push him away. She didn't. She rose onto her toes. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was desperate, intense, and starving. It was the taste of weeks of restraint snapping all at once. His lips moved over hers with a demanding pressure, claiming her, devouring her. Emma melted into him, the fear, the anger, the logic. It all dissolved in the heat of his touch. She opened her mouth to him, and he groaned low in his throat, deepening the kiss, his tongue sweeping against hers. She gripped his lapels tighter, pulling him closer. If that was even possible. She could feel the hard wall of his chest, the rapid, thundering beat of his heart that matched her own. His hand on the back of her neck tightened, angling her head to give him better access. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air. He kissed her like he wanted to memorize the taste of her. The storm raged outside, the thunder shaking the walls, but inside the circle of his arms, amidst the shadows and the flickering emergency lights, nothing else existed. There was only Luca and the terrifying, wonderful realization that she was not just a target. She was the only thing he couldn't control, and he was the only thing she couldn't resist. The week following the blackout at La Serena was defined not by grand gestures, but by the spaces between them. It was a week of static electricity, a low, constant hum that vibrated beneath the floorboards of the restaurant and settled deep in Emma Cole's bones. They had crossed a line in the dark that night, and there was no going back. But they could not go forward either. Not in the light, not where people could see. Their relationship became a series of stolen seconds. It was the brush of Luca's knuckles against hers as he passed the service bar, a touch so fleeting that if she blinked, she would miss it, but so deliberate it left her skin burning. It was the way he looked at her from across the dining room, his eyes dark and possessive, tracking her movement as she wove through the tables. It was the secret, quiet conversations in the alleyway during her breaks, where the scent of rain and old brick mixed with the smoke of the cigarette she occasionally shared with him. "You should quit those," Luca told her one night, leaning against the damp wall of the alley. His suit was impeccable, a stark contrast to the graffiti-stained bricks behind him. "I will quit when my life stops being a stress test," Emma replied, exhaling a thin plume of smoke toward the sky. "Besides, it is my one vice. You have empires to run. I have nicotine. Let me have this." Luca watched her, his gaze dropping to her mouth. "I am not trying to control you. Emma, aren't you?" she teased softly, stepping closer until the toe of her sneaker touched the polished leather of his shoe. "I think you try to control everything. It is your factory setting." Luca didn't deny it. He reached out, his fingers grazing the fabric of her sleeve. "I do not want to control you," he said, his voice dropping to that rough, intimate register that made her knees weak. "I just want to keep you here, alive, with me." It was in those moments, hidden by the shadows of the dumpster and the fire escape, that Emma saw the man beneath the myth. He was lonely. He was carrying a legacy he hadn't asked for, a crown made of lead that was slowly crushing his spine. Late at night, after the restaurant closed and the staff had dispersed, Luca would drive her home, but he didn't take the direct route. They took the long way,
winding through the hills that overlooked Harborview. The city spread out below them like a grid of glittering diamonds. Inside the sealed, leather-scented quiet of his car, they talked. They didn't talk about the Valentis or the police or the money he had paid for her mother's medical bills. They talked about the things that actually mattered. Emma told him about her father, a dock worker who died of a heart attack at 50, leaving behind nothing but debt and a collection of jazz records. She told him about the guilt she felt for wanting to leave Harborview, for wanting a life that didn't smell like salt water and desperation. Luca listened. He absorbed her words like oxygen. In return, he gave her fragments of himself. He told her about growing up in a house where silence was a weapon. He told her about the first time he realized his father was not just a businessman, but a king in a violent kingdom. "I wanted to be an architect," he confessed one night as they idled at a red light. "I like the idea of building things, structures, stability. You still build things," Emma said softly, watching his profile in the passing streetlights. "No," Luca said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I maintain things. I keep the walls from falling down. There is a difference." The intimacy between them grew, knitting them together until the air in the car felt heavy with unspoken desires. Every time he dropped her off, the goodbye lingered longer. The kiss on the cheek became a kiss near the corner of her mouth. The hand on her shoulder became a hand lingering on her waist. Then came Thursday. It had been a brutal double shift. 2 servers had called out sick, leaving Emma to manage half the floor by herself. By the time the last customer left at 11 o'clock, her feet were throbbing, her back ached, and her patience was frayed to a thin wire. Luca was waiting for her at the bar, nursing a glass of mineral water. He watched her wipe down the last table, his expression unreadable. When she finally untied her apron and tossed it into the hamper, he stood up. "You look like you were about to collapse," he said. "I am fine." Emma lied, though her voice lacked its usual snap. "I just need sleep. About 14 hours of it. Come with me," Luca said. Emma paused, her hand on her purse. "To the car? To my place," he said. "Just for one drink. You need to sit down somewhere that isn't a hard wooden chair or a bus seat." Emma hesitated. Going to his home felt like crossing another line, perhaps the final one. It was entering his sanctuary. It was admitting that this wasn't just a flirtation in a restaurant. "I have work in the morning," she said weakly. "I will have you back before dawn," Luca promised. I want to be with you, away from here, away from the eyes." His vulnerability was her undoing. Emma nodded, her heart beginning a slow, thunderous rhythm against her ribs. "Okay, one drink." Luca's penthouse was located in the tallest spire of the Skyline Tower, a glass needle that pierced the fog above the harbor. The elevator ride was silent and swift, lifting them above the grit of the streets. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, Emma stopped. It was beautiful, but cold. The floors were dark hardwood, the furniture low and modern, upholstered in charcoal and slate. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city that was breathtaking and terrifying. It felt less like a home and more like a command center. "It is quiet," Emma said, stepping inside. "That is the point," Luca said. He took her coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders for a moment before he hung it in the closet. He walked to a wet bar made of black marble and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He brought them over to the seating area, where Emma was standing near the window, looking down at the tiny, moving lights of the cars below. "Bourbon," Luca said, handing her a glass. "It will help the ache." Emma took a sip. The liquid was smooth and fiery, warming her chest instantly. She turned to face him. He had loosened his tie, unbuttoning the top button of his dress shirt. It was such a small gesture, but on a man who was always so armored, it felt incredibly intimate. "Do you ever get lonely up here?" she asked, gesturing to the vast, empty space. "It feels like a fortress." "It is a fortress," Luca said. He sat down in a large leather armchair, stretching his long legs out, and yes, it gets lonely. but lonely is safe. Emma sat down on the sofa opposite him, curling her legs beneath her. She took another sip of bourbon, watching him over the rim of the glass. The city lights cast a soft, diffused glow into the room, painting his face in shadow and silver. You do not have to be lonely. Luca, she said softly, you choose it. You push people away before they can get close enough to see that you are just a man. And what happens when they see? Luca asked. Swirling the ice in his glass, they see the blood, they see the choices, and they run. I haven't run, Emma pointed out. Luca looked at her. His eyes were dark, intense. No, you haven't. And that terrifies me more than anything. Why? Emma asked, putting her glass down on the coffee table. Because I do not know how to protect you from me, Luca admitted. His voice was low, rasping in the quiet room. Emma stood up. She crossed the small distance between them and perched herself on the wide arm of his leather chair. She was close to him now, looking down into his face. You look so serious, she teased gently, trying to lighten the heavy atmosphere. You are sitting there like a king on his throne, brooding over his kingdom. You look less like a kingpin and more like an actual human who needs a nap. Luca didn't smile. He looked up at her, his gaze tracking the curve of her neck, the softness of her hair. This isn't a throne, he murmured. It is just a chair. It is a very expensive chair, Emma countered, swinging her legs slightly. It feels like a throne, and you look like you are carrying the weight of the crown. Luca set his glass down on the floor. He stood up. Suddenly, Emma was no longer looking down at him. He was standing in front of her, his body blocking the view of the city, his presence filling her entire field of vision. He placed his hands on either side of the chair back, bracing his arms. He wasn't touching her, but he had effectively caged her between his body and the leather. Emma's breath hitched. She stopped swinging her legs. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charging with a heat that radiated from him. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his irises. She could smell the bourbon on his breath. You treat me like I am normal, Luca whispered. You are normal, Emma whispered back, her voice shaking. You are just complicated. No, Luca said. He shook his head slightly. I am a lie. Emma, everything about me is a construction. The suit, the politeness, the power. It is all a wall I built to keep the world out. He leaned closer, his nose brushing against hers. But you, he murmured, you see right through it. You look at me, and you do not see the Romano Dawn. You see Luca. His eyes searched hers, raw and unguarded. You are the only honest thing in my life. Emma. The only thing that isn't a game. The only thing I haven't bought or stolen or forced. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. The vulnerability in his voice, usually so controlled, broke something open inside her. She felt a rush of affection so strong it made her dizzy. She felt the heat climbing up her neck, flushing her cheeks. She looked at his lips, then back to his eyes. Say that again, she whispered. Luca paused. His gaze softened, melting the hard edges of his face. Say what? He breathed. That I am the only honest thing, she said. Luca moved his hand from the chair back. He reached up, his fingers sliding into the hair at the nape of her neck. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin behind her ear, sending a shiver racing down her spine. You are the only honest thing in my life, he repeated. His voice was slower, rougher, vibrating with a suppressed hunger. You are the only thing that makes sense. Emma didn't wait. She reached up, her fingers gliding along the sharp line of his jaw. She felt the roughness of his 5 o'clock shadow, the tension in the muscle. She pulled him down. Luca made a low sound in his throat, a mix of relief and need, and crushed his mouth to hers. This was not like the kiss in the restaurant. That had been reactive, a storm breaking. This was deliberate. This was a claiming. Emma parted her lips, and he deepened the kiss instantly. It was slow, lingering, and devastatingly thorough. He tasted of bourbon and desire. He kissed her as if he had been starving for years, and she was the first meal he had ever seen. Luca's hands moved. They slid down from the chair back to her waist, gripping her firmly. His thumbs brushed slow, maddening circles through the thin fabric of her blouse, burning her skin. He pulled her forward until her knees were pressed against his thighs, anchoring her to him. Emma arched into him, her fingers threading into the thick, dark hair at the base of his neck. She tugged gently, and he groaned into her mouth, the sound vibrating through her chest. Every movement was hungry, yet careful. He handled her with a terrifying reverence, as if he were afraid she would vanish if he held her too tight, but his control was fraying. She could feel it in the tremor of his hands, in the ragged cadence of his breathing. Luca broke the kiss to trail his lips down her jawline. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling sharply. "Emma," he rasped against her skin. "I cannot. I do not know how to stop. Don't stop." Emma gasped, her head falling back. Luca pulled back to look at her. His eyes were blown wide, dark pools of want. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, letting it drop to the floor without a second thought, a $2,000 garment discarded like a rag. He placed his hands flat against her chest, right over her heart, feeling its frantic rhythm. Emma covered his hands with hers, pressing him closer. She was ready. The fear was gone, replaced by a certainty that scared her more than the danger ever had. She loved him. She loved this complicated, dangerous, broken man. She leaned forward to kiss him again, her lips brushing his. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound came from the coffee table. It was harsh, mechanical, and relentless. Luca froze. His lips were millimeters from hers. He closed his eyes, a look of profound pain and frustration crossing his face. He cursed under his breath, a sharp Italian word that Emma didn't know but understood perfectly. "Ignore it," he muttered, leaning back in to kiss her. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It didn't stop. It was an insistent, angry vibration against the glass surface of the table. "Luca," Emma whispered, pulling back slightly. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, her lips swollen and red. "You have to check it." "I do not want to check it," Luca growled, his forehead resting against hers. "I want you." "It might be important," Emma said, though she hated the words even as she said them. "It is late. No one calls this late for good news." Luca let out a long, shuddering breath. He pulled away from her, the loss of contact leaving Emma feeling suddenly cold. He picked up the phone. He looked at the screen, and his expression instantly transformed. The lover vanished. The architect vanished. The dawn returned. His eyes went cold. His posture stiffened into steel. "What?" he answered, his voice devoid of warmth. Emma watched him from the arm of the chair. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold on to the warmth of the moment that was rapidly slipping away. She watched Luca's face as he listened. She saw his jaw clench so hard she thought a tooth might crack. She saw his knuckles turn white around the phone. "When?" Luca demanded. He listened again. "Is she hurt?" Emma's stomach dropped. "She?" Luca listened for another few seconds. Then he spoke, his voice low and dangerous, dripping with a quiet menace that made the hair on Emma's arms stand up. "Find them. I do not care which hole they crawled into. Find them and send protection to the girl's house. Now." He hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, staring out at the city lights, his back to Emma. The silence in the room was no longer intimate. It was suffocating. "Luca?" Emma whispered. He turned around. His face was pale, his eyes burning with a cold fury. It was Matteo. He said, "My lieutenant." "What happened?" Emma asked, standing up. Her legs felt shaky. "Tonight, after work. One of your co-workers, Sarah." Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sarah? Is she okay? She is shaken," Luca said grimly. "But physically, she is fine. They did not hurt her. They just stopped her." "Stopped her?" "Two men," Luca said, the words coming out like bullets. "They cornered her 3 blocks from the restaurant. They had a message." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. She took a step back, bumping into the chair. "What was the message?" she whispered, though she already knew. "They told her to tell you something," Luca said. He looked at Emma, and for a second, his mask slipped, revealing a depth of fear and guilt that broke her heart. "They said, 'Tell Emma Cole that she has beautiful eyes. It would be a shame if she couldn't use them anymore.'" The room spun. Emma grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. The threat was specific. It was personal. It wasn't just a warning to stay away. It was a promise of violence. "They used my name," she whispered, horror washing over her. "Yes," Luca said. His voice was thick with self-loathing. "They know who you are. They know we are close. And now you are a target. Officially." He began to pace the room, his movements agitated and sharp. "I was arrogant," he spat, running a hand through his hair. "I thought I could keep you separate. I thought if I was careful—" "You were careful," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I was not careful enough," Luca shouted, turning on her. "I brought you here. I let myself get distracted, and now the Valentis are threatening to blind you because of me." He stopped pacing. He looked at her, and the distance between them felt like a canyon. The tender moment on the chair, the kiss, the confession, it all felt like it had happened in a different lifetime. "Get your coat," Luca said. His voice was flat again, commanding. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, tears stinging her eyes. "I am taking you to a safe house." Luca said, "You cannot go back to your apartment, not tonight, not until I handle this. But my brother. "Silvio is already picking up your brother," Luca said. "He will be waiting for us. Your mother is safe at the clinic. I have men stationed there already." He walked over and grabbed his jacket from the floor, shrugging it on. The armor was back in place. Emma stood frozen. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her. She had fallen in love with the king, and now the castle was under siege. "Emma," Luca said, holding out his hand. He didn't move to touch her. He waited. "We have to go." She looked at his hand, the same hand that had just been caressing her waist, the same hand that was now clenched in a fist of rage. She realized then that Marco had been right. The danger wasn't just a possibility. It was here. It was breathing down her neck. But as she looked at Luca's face, tight with fear for her, she knew she couldn't turn back. She was in this. She reached out and took his hand. It was cold. "Let's go," she whispered. Luca squeezed her fingers, tight enough to bruise, and led her out of the penthouse, away from the soft light and the promise of love, and back into the darkness of his world. The apartment smelled of lemon polish and silence. It was a sleek, modern space on the 10th floor of a building Emma Cole had never noticed before. Despite having lived in Harborview her entire life, it was one of Luca's properties, legitimate, discreet, and currently a prison. Emma paced the length of the gray carpet in the living room, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Her mother was asleep in the master bedroom, sedated by the stress of the move and the medication for her treatments. But Emma was wide awake. Every time she looked at the heavy steel door, she felt a fresh wave of nausea. She was safe here. Luca had promised her that. But safety felt suffocating. Her mind drifted back to 3 days ago, right before the move, when a man in a tan trench coat had walked into La Sirena while she was setting up. He hadn't ordered food. He had flashed a badge. "Agent Harris. FBI," he had said. His voice mild, but his eyes sharp as flint. He had leaned against the bar, watching her polish glasses. "We know about your relationship with Mr. Romano, Miss Cole, and we know you are a smart woman. Smart women usually know when to get off a sinking ship." Emma had kept polishing, her heart thumping. "I do not know what you're talking about. He will drag you down," Harris had said, placing a card on the counter. "It is gravity. Emma, men like him only go one way eventually. Down. If you want to help yourself and your family, give us a call. We can offer better protection than he can." She had thrown the card away, but the words had stuck like burrs in her mind. Gravity. The sound of the front door unlocking snapped her back to the present. Emma froze, watching the handle turn. Luca walked in. He looked like he had been through a war. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms tense with muscle. He smelled of smoke and cold rain. He locked the door behind him, throwing the deadbolt with a harsh, metallic clack. "You are still awake," he said, his voice rough. "I cannot sleep."
Luca, Emma said, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and anger. How can I sleep? I'm hiding in a stranger's apartment while people are trying to kill me. Luca walked over to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. They are not trying to kill you anymore. Emma, I'm handling it. Handling it? Emma let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Like you handled the warehouse? She saw his back stiffen. The news had broken an hour ago. One of the Romano logistics warehouses near the docks had been firebombed. No one had been hurt, but the message was clear. Total destruction. And then there was the photo. Luca turned around. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of photo paper. He placed it on the kitchen island. It was a grainy picture of a small, blue house with a peeling white fence. Emma's childhood home. The house where she and Ben had grown up. The house they had lost to the bank 3 years ago. They sent this to my office, Luca said quietly. It is a threat. They are saying they know everything. They know where you came from. They know where your heart lives. Emma stared at the photo, a cold chill seizing her chest. They are watching us. Not for long, Luca said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His eyes were dark voids, completely devoid of the warmth she had seen in him just a week ago. What does that mean? Emma asked, dread coiling in her stomach. It means I am done waiting, Luca said. I have been patient. I have been strategic. But they firebombed my property. They threatened you. Tonight, the leash comes off. He began to pace, his energy frantic and dangerous. I have called in the crews from the south side. We're going to hit the Valenti safe houses. Tonight, all of them. We are going to burn them out of this city until there is nothing left but ash. Emma watched him. She saw the rage vibrating in his hands. She saw the terrifying logic of violence taking over the man she loved. No, she whispered. Luca stopped. Excuse me, no, Emma said louder, stepping toward him. You cannot do that. I do not have a choice, Luca shouted, his voice echoing off the bare walls. They threatened you. Do you expect me to sit here and do nothing? I expect you to be smarter than them, Emma shouted back. If you go to war tonight, Luca, it never ends. You kill them. Their cousins come for you. Then the police come for everyone. And what happens to me then? What happens to my mother when you are in prison or in a morgue? Luca slammed his hand down on the island. I am doing this for you. You are playing God, Emma cried, tears springing to her eyes. You think you can control life and death, but you are just terrified. You are reacting like a wounded animal, not a leader. Luca stared at her, his chest heaving. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the tendons straining in his neck. I cannot sit still while your name is tossed around by men who would hurt you, he growled. I cannot breathe. Emma, every time I think about them touching you, I lose my mind. I have to end it. And if you die ending it? Emma asked, her voice cracking. She walked right up to him, ignoring the danger radiating from him. She grabbed the front of his shirt, her fists bunching the fabric. I am terrified. Luca, she sobbed, the tears finally spilling over. I am terrified of loving a man who might not live long enough to grow old with me. Luca froze. I am scared that one day I will get a phone call, Emma continued, her voice shaking with raw emotion. And it won't be you. It will be the police, or Silvio, telling me that you are gone, that you dragged me into this life, just to leave me alone in it. She buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking violently. I do not want to be the widow of a mob boss. Luca, I just want you. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of Emma's weeping. Slowly, the tension drained out of Luca's body. The rage, which had been a towering inferno just seconds ago, was extinguished by the undeniable reality of her pain. He lifted his hands. They were trembling. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tightly against him. He buried his face in her hair, closing his eyes. I am sorry, he whispered. His voice was hoarse, broken. I am so sorry. He held her as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the earth. He rocked her gently, his hand stroking the back of her head. I will not let them win, he murmured against her ear, and I will not let my rage decide our future.
I promise you, Emma, I'm not going to leave you alone." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. He used his thumbs to wipe the tears from her cheeks, his touch incredibly tender. "I have a better way," he said softly. 2 hours later, Luca sat in the dim light of his study in the safe house. He was not cleaning a gun. He was on the phone. The conversation was short, cryptic. "The shipment is at the old textile mill on 4th Street, Luca said into the receiver. "Tonight, all of it. And the leadership is meeting at the club on the waterfront at 2 o'clock in the morning." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yes," Luca said, "you will find everything you need to put them away for 20 years. My name stays out of it." That was the deal. He hung up. Emma stood in the doorway, watching him. "Who was that?" she asked. "That," Luca said, turning to face her with a tired but calm expression, "was Agent Harris." Emma's eyes widened. You called the FBI." "I gave them a gift," Luca said, standing up. "I gave them the Valenti family on a silver platter. The guns, the drugs, the books. Everything Agent Harris has been trying to find for 5 years. But that is breaking the code," Emma whispered. "Omerta, to hell with the code," Luca said. "The code protects the business. Tonight, I am protecting us." He walked over to her and took her hands. "I negotiated with the Moretti crew from the south. They are going to absorb the Valenti territory once the arrests happen. In exchange, they leave La Serena alone, permanently." "And you?" Emma asked. "What happens to you?" "I step back." Luca said, "Agent Harris gets his career-making bust. The Valentis go to federal prison. And I focus on the legitimate side of the business, the real estate, the restaurants." He squeezed her hands. "It is a risk," he admitted, "but it is better than a war." The night was loud. From the window of the safe house, Emma watched the distant flashes of red and blue lights painting the low clouds over the harbor. Sirens wailed like a chorus of banshees, echoing off the skyscrapers. Her phone buzzed with news alerts: massive FBI raid on waterfront, multiple arrests in organized crime, crackdown. Emma paced the floor, jumping at every noise. Luca was not with her. He had gone to La Sirena. "I have to be there," he had told her. "If they figure out what is happening, they might try one last desperate hit. I need to draw their fire away from here." At La Sirena, the parking lot was slick with rain. The restaurant was dark, closed for the night. Luca stood under the awning, flanked by Silvio and 4 of his most trusted men. They were not hiding. They were waiting. A black SUV screeched around the corner, tires smoking. It was the Valentis. They were cornered, panicked and looking for revenge. The SUV slammed to a halt in the middle of the lot. The doors flew open. 3 men spilled out, guns drawn. Luca did not draw a weapon. He stepped out from under the awning, his hands visible, empty, and raised to chest height. "Go home, Marco!" Luca shouted, his voice cutting through the rain. "It is over! The feds are at your warehouse. They are at your house. There is nowhere to go." The lead gunman, a Valenti capo named Marco, hesitated. His gun wavered. "You rat! You sold us out! I saved the city!" Luca shouted back. "Put the guns down. The police are 2 minutes away. If you shoot me, you die here. If you surrender, you get a lawyer. It is your choice." It was a gamble, a terrifying, high-stakes gamble. Luca stood perfectly still, his heart hammering against his ribs, staring down the barrel of a rival's gun. He was betting on their self-preservation. He was betting on logic. Sirens began to swell in the distance, getting louder by the second. The gunman looked at Luca, then at the approaching lights. He cursed, screaming in frustration, and threw his gun onto the wet asphalt. "It is over," Luca breathed, his shoulders sagging slightly. Within seconds, the parking lot was swarmed. Police cruisers boxed in the SUV. Officers with tactical gear surrounded the Valenti men. Luca stood in the chaos of flashing lights, watching his enemies being handcuffed and shoved into the back of squad cars. An unmarked sedan pulled up. Agent Harris stepped out. He walked over to Luca. They did not shake hands. Harris just looked at him, a small, grudging nod of respect. "You cut it close." "Romano," Harris said. "I like to keep things interesting," Luca replied coolly. Harris watched the last Valenti being loaded up. You know, this does not make you a saint." "I never claimed to be a saint, Agent," Luca said, adjusting his cuffs. "I am just a businessman cleaning up the neighborhood." Harris smirked. "Keep it that way." The newspapers called it the Harborview Clean Sweep. The Valenti family was dismantled overnight. The rumors about who had tipped off the feds swirled through the city for weeks. But nothing stuck to Luca, to the public. He was just another lucky bystander who had survived the turf war. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday. Emma stood outside the hospital. The air was crisp, hinting at autumn. Her mother had just finished her first round of the new treatment and was sitting up in bed, complaining about the hospital jello, a beautiful, miraculous sound. Emma saw a tan sedan parked at the curb. Agent Harris was behind the wheel. He rolled down the window as she walked past. He looked at her, then tipped his head slightly. "Some people in this city finally made the right call. Miss Cole," he said. Emma smiled, a small, genuine thing. Gravity isn't the only law of physics. Agent Harris, sometimes things rise. Harris chuckled and drove away. That night, La Serena was quiet. The tension that had gripped the walls for months was gone, replaced by the clinking of silverware and the soft murmur of conversation. Emma was not working. She was sitting in the back corner booth, wearing a dress of deep emerald green. Luca sat across from her. There were no bodyguards, no entourage, just a bottle of the 1998 Barolo and 2 glasses. They sat with their fingers intertwined on the white tablecloth, tracing the lines of each other's palms. "I sold the warehouse on 4th Street today," Luca said quietly. "And the shipping contracts." Emma looked up, surprised. "You did?" "I am moving the capital into the construction firm," Luca explained. "We have a bid for the new library downtown. It is legitimate work. Boring, lots of permits." "I like boring," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "Boring is safe. I cannot promise it will all be perfect." "Emma," Luca said, his expression serious, "I have a past. It will always be there. There will always be people who remember who I was." "I know," Emma said. "And I am not going to become a choir boy overnight," he added with a wry smile. "I am still me. I still like control. I know that, too." Emma laughed softly. "But you are trying. That is what matters. We will figure it out," Luca said. "Limits, boundaries. We will build something new." They paid the check, Luca insisted, though Emma made a show of reaching for her wallet and walked out into the cool night air. They strolled along the harbor walk, the water lapping gently against the stone wall. The city lights reflected on the black surface of the ocean, dancing like scattered stars. They walked in comfortable silence, their shoulders brushing. Luca stopped near an old iron lamppost. He turned to face her. He looked at her with a reverence that made her breath catch in her throat. He reached out, brushing his thumb over her lower lip, tracing the curve of it as if he were memorizing the shape for a time when he might not be able to see it. "I have spent my whole life fighting for power," he said softly. "Fighting to be the biggest, the scariest, the strongest." He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. But these last few weeks, stepping back, putting down the gun to pick up the phone. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done." "Why?" Emma whispered. "Because it meant trusting someone else," Luca said. "It meant trusting you." He rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "I cannot promise you a fairy tale, Emma, but I can promise you this. I will wake up every day and fight to be the man you think I am. I will fight to be worthy of you." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, hot and sweet. She smiled, her heart swelling until she thought it might burst. She tilted her head back, looking into his dark eyes. "Say that again," she whispered. Luca smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. "Say what?" he teased gently. "That you will fight for me," she said. Luca leaned in, his lips brushing against hers as he spoke. "I will fight for you, Emma, every single day, until the end." His voice was rough, sincere, and filled with a vow deeper than any he had ever made to the family.
Emma smiled through her tears. Then she reached up, her hand sliding around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. She pulled him down and kissed him. It was a deep, lingering kiss, tasted of wine and salt air and promise. It wasn't a kiss of desperation or danger. It was a kiss of arrival. Luca's arms wrapped securely around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground, holding her tight against him. Above them, the city of Harborview slept, a little safer, a little quieter. And by the water, two flawed people held onto each other, choosing love and hard work over easy lies, knowing that the real power wasn't in controlling the world, but in having someone worth losing it for. Thank you so much for listening to the final part of Say That Again. She whispered, "It has been an incredible journey watching Emma and Luca find their way through the darkness to each other. I would love to know, what did you think of Luca's decision to choose peace over revenge? Do you think they can make a normal life work? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please hit that subscribe button for Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, keep believing in love.